The two of them chatted to each other like the work area was an isolated world, unmoved by whatever antics Old Nine and his lackeys were pulling outside. But Old Nine obviously wasn't going to make it easy for Carter. Not long later, a discomforting noise spread through the library. Chairs were creaking under the weight, and the back of the chairs kept knocking into tables. Carter looked over at the noise and saw that some of those opposite were shaking their legs and some were rocking their chair. None of them were seated properly. He breathed in deeply, about to rebuke them when those people immediately stopped, as if knowing what Carter was about to say. However, the moment that Carter looked away, the frustrating noise began again. It was obvious that they were doing it on purpose to make Carter uncomfortable. Even if Carter had more patience, it was hard for him to feign ignorance when people were acting so audaciously in his territory. He expressionlessly stared back at Old Nine and decided that it was better to get the patrol team over first. However, just as he picked up the walkie-talkie, someone suddenly sprinted through the library door. "Oh crap, Idle, I heard." The latter part of Gavin's sentence was choked in his throat, for he had caught sight of the people sitting in the library. He stuck close to the wall as he snuck over to the work area, whispering to Carter, "I heard that Old Nine was bringing his gang to get back at you." This information was very timely. "This has nothing to do with you," Carter said. "Hurry up and get out." "No way, I'm going to help you," Gavin said and checked around him, then walked towards the tables in the library. Carter was surprised by this. Could Gavin be going to pick a fight for him? In the end, Gavin politely spoke to the person blocking his way. "Excuse me." That muscleman looked Gavin from head to toe, then back up again, probably not understanding what on earth this weakling was up to. In any case, he pulled his legs back. Gavin went to grab a chair from the last row and clumsily crossed the enemy zone, placing the chair next to Carter's work area. As Carter was seated on the inside, Melvin was nearer to Gavin. Gavin's gaze traversed Melvin like he was air, solemnly telling Carter, "Idle, I will support you forever." "Hey." Melvin waved a hand in front of Gavin, breaking his ardent gaze. "Go back to wherever you came from. We don't need you meddling." "What is it to you?" Gavin said irritably. "Do you know what kind of relationship Officer James and I have? So what if you came here first? The place you're sitting now may not be yours in the future." Amusement written on his face, Melvin asked, "You even want to steal my place?" Carter looked out of the window, forcibly suppressing the urge to massage his temples. What on earth were they doing? Did Melvin have nothing better to do? He clearly knew that Gavin worshipped his online handle, not Carter. Further, Gavin was also unable to read the atmosphere. Carter hadn't thought of a way to resolve Old Nine yet. It wasn't the time to get into this now with so many people in the audience. "Officer James." Gavin's voice pulled Carter back to attention. "Tell us, who is more important between him and me?" Carter really wanted to say, "Kid, you got the wrong guy." Despite Carter eventually calling the patrol team over, they couldn't do anything about Old Nine. A guard told Old Nine to leave if he wasn't going to read. In the end, all of them immediately went to grab a book from the shelves, and that guard couldn't say anything else. The patrol team stayed guarding the library for about 10 minutes. Old Nine's group didn't act up either, randomly flipping through the books, dawdling. Ultimately, the captain of the patrol team could only notify Carter that they were leaving, bringing his team out of the library. Once the patrol team was gone, Old Nine's group started to rock their chairs again, annoying Carter so much that his almost blew his top. After barely making it to 2 o'clock, Old Nine's men finally left. But on Tuesday, the same thing happened again. Old Nine brought his lackeys back to the library, giving Carter hell. "I really can't hit them?" Melvin appeared to have reached the end of his patience. If Carter hadn't warned him not to resolve his problems with violence, he might already have knocked Old Nine to his grave. "No, you can't," Carter said. To be honest, Carter was also at the end of his rope. He really wanted to hit Old Nine as well, but he didn't have any justifiable reason to do so. As a prison officer, he couldn't resort to his fists just because an inmate had irked him. Old Nine was likely counting on this, which was why he could come to Carter's turf and challenge him this flagrantly. We'll see how long they can keep this up. Carter knew that Old Nine was waiting for him to lower his head in submission. Him going up to ask, "When will you be leaving?" was nothing short of a show of weakness. No matter what, it was impossible for Carter to lower his head. Wednesday arrived. There was a bit more mail to deliver than usual. An inmate's daughter had been admitted to university, an inmate's wife had written him a farewell letter. Actually, there were only 10 or so inmates who regularly received and sent letters out. One among them only sent letters, never receiving a reply. Carter decided to have a good chat with him today. "Thank you. Sorry for the trouble, Officer James." In Block A, Shay passed a letter from inside a cell, thanking Carter as he always did. Usually, Carter would leave after taking the letter without speaking to him as he didn't want Princess to give him trouble, but it was different today. He glanced at the address after taking the letter from Shay. It carried the same address as it always did. He weighed it in his hand, saying absently, "Your letter might take a long while to be sent this time." A long while? Shay had already walked further into the cell. Hearing Carter, he came back to the window. "Why?" "Why?" Carter flatly repeated, looking at the letter in his hand. He asked, "Don't you know what Old Nine is doing?" Carter didn't point it out directly, but it wasn't hard to connect the dots. Since Old Nine was giving him hell, then he was returning it in kind to Old Nine's boss. While it was inadvisable to provoke Shay, nor would Carter take the initiative to provoke trouble, if the need really arose, he wouldn't shy away from it. He had to check the contents of inmates' letters every day, and therefore knew many inmates' private affairs, including Shay's. "As long as Old Nine doesn't go too far, I don't care what he does," Shay said. Compared to oppressing inmates, leading a group of people to relax in the library couldn't quite count as stepping past the line. In view of how Shay didn't even intervene back when Melvin had beat Old Nine into a sorry state, Carter knew that Shay wouldn't intervene in this either. "Then I don't care about your letter as well." Carter lifted his gaze, looking impassively at Shay. "Officer James, I know you're a good man." Shay looked fixedly into Carter's eyes. "You won't do this." "That's where you're wrong, Shay." Carter calmly spoke. "For the likes of you, I'm capable of anything. Don't think that I'm some kind of saint." Shay looked at Carter without a word, obviously weighing the pros and cons in his mind. After a time, he breathed out, letting up. "All right, I'll have a chat with Old Nine." Having received the answer he wanted, Carter didn't dally, taking the letter and leaving the cell block. Sure enough, Old Nine didn't come back to the library in the afternoon. Other inmates likely weren't made aware of this yet and still didn't dare to come in to read. As such, only Melvin came into the library at noon. As for Gavin, Carter had already notified Luke, getting him to manage his kid and stop him from butting in, so Gavin didn't appear at this time as well. "Sit outside today." Seeing that Melvin was walking over, Carter lifted his chin, gesturing towards the table seating. Melvin, opening the partition of the work area, paused when he heard this. "Old Nine won't be coming," Carter explained. "Why?" Melvin went on to open the partition and sat next to Carter. He had told him to sit outside, but this guy still ended up sitting inside. All of a sudden, Carter discovered that Melvin's so-called listening to him was more aptly termed Schrodinger's obedience. "I talked to Shay," Carter said. "He agreed to help me take care of Old Nine." "Shay?" A hint of surprise entered Melvin's expression. "I went to the warden. Are you sure it's because of Shay?" This time it was Carter's turn to be surprised. "You went to the warden?" "Yeah," Melvin said. "You said I can't use force, so I could only think of other ways." "What did the warden tell you?" Carter asked. "He said that he would increase their workload," Melvin said. Doing this was tantamount to abusing power to make life difficult for those in Old Nine's group. After a time, they would find themselves targeted by everyone and then uncover Carter as the cause. In other words, they came to the library in provocation, assuming that they had the upper hand, when they were in actuality increasing their workload for themselves. Anyone with brains would know that this was an extremely dumb move on their part. Swaggering with pride whilst getting screwed on the sly, they were virtually getting more than they bargained for. For Carter, this might only put him in a bad mood. But for Old Nine and his lackeys, they were getting an actual burden. With this result, Carter no longer needed to feel annoyed. He could even draw back and spectate as Old Nine's group got served their just desserts. Either way, no matter how anyone looked at it, Carter was the one who won this standoff. Then it can't be the warden, said Carter. The results wouldn't be so quick if it was. Having their workload increased for less than a day wasn't enough for Old Nine's group to realize that they were getting power played. It was apparent that Melvin agreed with Carter's words. He stopped considering the possibility of it being the work of the warden and asked Carter instead, "Why would Shay help you?" This was a bit of a long story. Carter drank some water and chose the easiest entry point to begin. He said in a measured tone, "My work requires me to check inmates' letters. Shay would write a letter to an elderly couple every week." "An elderly couple?" Melvin asked. "His parents?" "No," Carter said. "The parents of the person he killed." Astonishment colored Melvin's expression. He clearly didn't expect this of Shay. "The contents of his letters are the normal, everyday variety. From his tone, he appears to be very familiar with that elderly couple, but they have never written back to him. I was curious why he persisted, so I went to read up on his case. As Carter used to work in the courthouses, it wasn't a challenge for him to dig up more information about a case like this. The guy he killed is called Ah Wei," Carter continued. "He was a close friend of Shay, practically brothers, and was also a suspect in a serial torture and murder case." "Wait," Melvin interrupted Carter. "You're saying that the person he killed was a suspect?" "That's right," Carter said. "At that time, there were several random torture and murder cases in the city. As the police were unable to find a pattern or motive, they didn't have anything to go on. Then a woman went missing and the city deployed the police force to do a full-scale search. It was at this time that the murder of Ah Wei took place. The woman was successfully rescued from an abandoned factory, and since then, no similar cases of torture and murder have occurred." "You mentioned that the police didn't have anything to go on," Melvin said as he turned it over, "which means that the police only listed Ah Wei as a suspect after his death." "Yes. He slipped completely under their radar at first," Carter said, "but later investigations showed that he was associated with a few past cases. However, upon his death, this became an unsolved case. In that case, Shay's motive for killing Ah Wei," Melvin likely shared Carter's opinion. "He claimed that it was a money dispute and refused to elaborate any further." "So what did the police conclude?" "The official verdict was intentional homicide." Carter paused. "But guess what the police privately thought?" "That there was a hidden agenda behind it," Melvin said. Shay refused to reveal his motive to protect his brother's reputation. "Murderer or not, there should at least be a bit of brotherly sentiment between them," Carter said. "But Shay refused to say anything, so no one knows the specifics of what happened." Melvin lowered his gaze contemplatively, as though recalling the brief interactions he had with Shay. Previously, Melvin claimed that Shay didn't go all out when hitting him. At that time, Carter felt that Shay should be a person who knew how far to go and when to stop. "So why did he help you?" Melvin looked at Carter and asked. "Did you reason it out with him?" "No," Carter shook his head. "I threatened that I wouldn't deliver his letter, which to him should be a rather serious matter." This threat actually worked on him? Melvin's brows creased. He was obviously unable to wrap his mind around it. This doesn't seem like the style of a prison boss. At the start, Carter also had this doubt. But when he gave it more thought, he felt that it was still worth a try. "Human nature is complicated, I guess," Carter said. "If I threatened him over something bad, he might not agree. But Old Nine was the one who started it this time. I feel that Shay has a clear sense of what's right and what's wrong." "So what you mean to say is," Melvin said, "he probably knows that you wouldn't threaten him over something bad." "Yeah," Carter said. It was also for this reason that his conversation with Shay could end so quickly. Impressive, Officer James. Melvin took a step back and switched to his usual cadence. I can't analyze people to the same depth. Although Carter couldn't win Melvin in IQ games, when it came to reading people, he considered himself to be a head above the rest. You probably classify Shay as a good person if that's so, Melvin spoke again. There's no single standard for good or bad, Carter said. However, I have always believed that there is no absolute evil in the world. This was a point of view that Carter had never disclosed to anyone, for he wasn't used to bearing his heart in front of others, but it was different when it came to Melvin. From what you're telling me, Shay sounds quite complicated. Melvin lowered his gaze in thought for a moment before looking at Carter again. I've decided to tell you something then. What? Carter asked. Shay plans to break out of prison,